The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, February 25th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, we're back after our typically ill-timed vacation, during which Bernie Sanders breaking fundraising records, anticipating more announcements on that front soon. Meanwhile, Elizabeth Warren has a non-radical plan for radical impact. Donald Trump heads to Vietnam for a North Korean summit. Total denuclearization. And speaking of which, lawsuits filed against Trump's emergency declaration. And as the Green New Deal is debated amongst Democrats, the Trump administration forms a prestigious climate denial panel. And payback for Mitch McConnell, one of his biggest fundraisers, climate denier Kelly Craft, now ambassador to the UN. And while the U.S. is edging toward a war with Venezuela, and in New York, the public advocate vote is tomorrow. Vote if you're a New York City voter. Speaking of elections, there'll be a new one in North Carolina's 9th. I guess the apple fell just a little too far from the tree, that the kid's testimony against dad. And Democrats to investigate Trump finances and NRA's financing, and introduce legislation to tighten background checks. And lastly, Supreme Court limits state and local asset seizure. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. What is that noise? Oh, yeah, that's ill-timed.
It's the kettle.
Ill-timed. Can we turn that off? Sounds like an airplane is taking off. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, after our break. And, of course, over the week, one of the best days in politics, I felt like, in a while. The day that Bernie Sanders announced and Elizabeth Warren came out with her universal daycare proposal. I've been waiting for one of those. And we will get into all of that. Bernie Sanders, of course, smashed fundraising records. Less than 24 hours had raised $6 million, which was like, I think, 4 times the next biggest amount that's been raised. Kamala Harris, I think, did 1.5 over the course of 24 or 48 hours. I don't know what it was, but
I gave my $27.
There you go.
So did I. Full disclosure.
And I think we're anticipating another announcement soon as to, how much they'll have raised over the course of 1 week. And just impressive numbers. And at one point he was asked, what's different this time around? And he said, we're going to win. And he ended up naming as his campaign manager Faz Shakur, who has been basically building out the ACLU's political operation. And, of course, some people might be aware that one of his senior advisors is a Majority Report producer emeritus, Josh Orton. Josh also, congratulations.
Oh, I did not know that.
Got married last weekend. That's where I went off to. And there was a little bit of tension, anticipating things that were happening. But
Mazel tov, Josh.
Yes.
Times 2.
And I think for his honeymoon, he and his wife went to Washington, D.C. We'll get into the Bernie stuff and the Elizabeth Warren stuff. And also, as the Green New Deal is heating up amongst the Democrats. Also, and please remind me to talk about this. I don't want to start off this way, but when I was in Wisconsin for the big wedding, I stopped by justcoffee.coop. And I went with another producer emeritus of the show from the way back, Stephen Sherrill, and good guy to go to because he was very inquisitive about the coffee production, and it's fascinating what these guys do. And he said to me, he goes, he said Sherrill, the idea of buying Just Coffee, he was sort of sold on beforehand, but after spending about 20, 25 minutes with a couple of these guys there, he's like, I can't remember how he phrased it, but he said, it would be unconscionable for me not to buy coffee from them. The way that we went into the I'll tell you a quick story. So, and I tried to do an Instagram live video of it, but then I lost reception. And it's not a huge operation. But they were explaining they have a room where they taste the coffee, right? Where they have a professional coffee taster come in. And they were explaining that, sometimes they get into some issues because, coffee, the quality of a coffee is subject to the weather. And to sometimes there's funguses or stuff like this. And so what most coffee roasters and suppliers do is they go and buy coffee from one farm. And if one year their coffee is, there was too much water and it's a little bit acidic or whatever it is, they just wash their hands of that farm and walk away. And whatever happens to that farm, happens to that farm. They go, a couple of towns over or to a slightly different region. They get a different coffee that substitutes for, whatever they've been selling. But Just Coffee is, it's a co-op, but it's also fair trade, but they go further than that. I mean, these are movement people. And so they were explaining that, what we do is if a farm is having a tough year or their coffee is, coming in at an 86 instead of an 88 rating or whatever it is, we stay with the farmers and we figure out a blend with other coffees that we have that can bring that coffee that we package back up to par as to where it is in terms of the quality. And ultimately, look, sometimes that costs us a little bit more. Sometimes it may knock a point or two off of the quality of the coffee for one batch. But we're in this with the long haul with these small farmers in Central and Latin America. And they have a different calculus as to what is ultimately the most important thing. So I was terribly impressed by that, and also got to take a picture of myself with the Majority Report blend that they have there. I didn't want to say anything at the time. They have a poster of Marin's coffee up, but not of the Majority Report. But that's no big deal. I mean, it was big enough for me to remember it, but it wasn't a big deal. But so justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate, the rest, coupon code majority, get 10% off. But it was, I don't want to say it was the highlight of my trip because I went for a wedding and the wedding was great, but it was the second highlight of my trip.
Wow. And they get coffee from the Zapatistas. Is that correct?
They started out there and they do. I mean, I think folks in that area, I don't know specifically, but it's good. It's good stuff. You can go onto their site and read more about what's going on there. But the wedding was fun, and Madison was fun. It was interesting to be back there because I hadn't been back there since the protests in 2011. And so just being on that square around the Capitol could still feel the energy. I think for most people it's already dissipated because it's been 8 years. But for me, it was that's what I remember that place as. So, okay, let's get into this. First, let's start with this, though. This is fascinating stuff. Apparently, over the week, AOC made a decision about the way she was going to staff. And, they're attacking her from all different sides now. The New York Post is upset because she doesn't have set up her local office yet or something to that effect. But she decided that she did not want there to be such a steep hierarchy in her office, in her congressional office. So instead of like hiring some old hand or at being chief of staff, probably, she went with someone maybe less senior, I think, and was going to basically raise the pay of the entry-level people. I mean, a nice gesture. It's a different approach. It's not controversial, right? I mean, who could find issue with this? Oh, Fox and Friends.
Get a load of this, right? A tweet went out yesterday. She said leadership begins at home or whatever, however she put it. And she's basically announcing that she is going to redistribute the money appropriated to her congressional office to make sure that the entry-level staffers get a fair share of money. Now, let me show you the numbers here, right? Oh, she puts this out. She wants $52,000 for the entry-level staff salary for anyone in her office. Here's the problem. You've got to find a way to get money to pay the entry-level people, so you're taking...
Pause it. So is she going to rob from a bank? How is she going to get this money? This is a problem. Let's go.
People, so she plans to take that from the chief of staff.
It's beautiful.
Senior staffers who would normally make $80,000 or normally make $154,000 for the chief of staff, probably only going to make about $80,000.
Every Capitol Hill office has a limited amount of money to pay their staff, right? So you have to decide how to allocate it. She said everyone in my office will pay a living wage. So I'm going to pay $15 an hour, which means your entry-level intern is making $52,000 while your chief of staff...
Pause it for 1 second. I don't know if this guy's ever worked anywhere else. Maybe they have a weird way of doing things at Fox. But your entry-level intern, there's no such thing as an entry-level intern. All interns are not even entry-level. Entry-level is a term that means sort of first level in terms of within an organization, or sometimes it can mean like entry-level, like across the board, first-level jobs that people get. Now, an internship is not a job because you don't get paid for it, or you get paid sub-entry level wages. So she's not paying an intern the entry level wages. She's paying either the entry level people, or maybe she's hiring people who are not entry level. I don't know. But he's got that wrong. But that's a minor point.
Living wage. So I'm going to pay $15 an hour, which means your entry-level intern is making $52,000, while your chief of staff, who is a very important role in a congressional office, now is capped at $80,000, as opposed to the actual market rate at Capitol Hill, which is closer to $150,000. Right. So everyone's between $52,000 and $80,000. It's actually socialism and communism on display.
Yeah, I mean,
you see that it's socialism and communism, and we have actually. We've actually done some research, and we found a graph that shows this. The chief of staff pay, as you can see, $154K, that's capitalism. 120. When you get down to $125K, that's socialism. Under $125K, that's communism.
Mm-hmm. Story checks out.
And then you can't see it because it goes off the paper. But if you get further below, it's socialism and communism. Socialism times communism is that's the way that you get there.
Yep, communism. It's like Karl Marx said. Communism is when you pay your interns more, And the more you pay your interns, the more communist it is.
There you go.
We're taking on the People's Policy Project.
I would exactly. I would love to have a focus group of Fox and Friends viewers, and just sort of what do they take away from that? Does that work? I suspect it does, right? It doesn't have to work on 100% of the people. Even if it works on 10 or 15%, the rest of them are just she's a socialist communist anyways. So I don't know if that's exactly it. They don't even think that much about it, right? That's the way it works.
Well, maybe with every time they try to make her look bad, a small handful of people are like, hey, actually, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like it's safer for them just to do what Glenn Beck does and paint pictures of her and don't actually respond to anything she actually does, but call her Alexandria Occasional Cortex and stuff
right,
like that.
Exactly.
Oh, crazy Cortez.
Folks, has your company outgrown QuickBooks? Are shared spreadsheets, manual processes, and legacy systems costing you time and money? Introducing NetSuite by Oracle, the business management software that handles every aspect of your business in an easy-to-use cloud platform. With NetSuite, you can save time, money, and unneeded headaches by managing sales, HR, finance, and accounting instantly right from your desk or even your phone. Thousands of the best-known and fastest-growing companies use NetSuite to manage their business, and now it's available to you. Better yet, it's more affordable than you think, because right now, NetSuite is offering you valuable insights to help you overcome the obstacles that are holding you back, free. Don't miss out on unleashing your business's full potential with this free guide, Crushing the 5 Barriers to Growth. You'll learn how to acquire new customers, increase profits, and finally get real visibility into your cash flow. Get NetSuite's guide, Crushing the 5 Barriers to Growth, at netsuite.com/majority now. That's netsuite.com/majority to download their free Crushing the 5 Barriers to Growth guide today. netsuite.com/majority. Also, you've heard me talk about what I did when I had my first kid and my second kid. I got term life insurance. And you, too, can protect your loved ones with the peace of mind of life insurance. Think you can't afford it? Chances are SelectQuote can help you get it for less than $1 a day. SelectQuote comparison shops up to 10 highly rated companies, including Prudential, Banner Life, Mutual of Omaha, and others, to find you the company with the best rates. For example, SelectQuote could find a 35-year-old man a $500,000 policy for under $19 a month. That's less than $1 a day. A cup of coffee a day costs you more than that. SelectQuote's breakthrough technology allows them to quickly match you with the best insurance company to find your best policy. Plus, the quotes are free. I can tell you that I bought the first amount of term life insurance from a life insurance salesman. I'm not going to say his name. And at the time I was 4 years out from quitting smoking. And he was like, oh, we'll change. My experience, it'll change. After 5, you can go back and ask them for a rate adjustment. And then the guy disappeared on me and I couldn't get the rate adjustment. Let me just put it this way. You would think that you would have a great experience with an actual agent, and I got news for you. Not the case. My second term insurance policy I did online, and much happier, frankly. I got a second round when Saul was born. Just bumped it up a little bit. You got 2 kids. But I'll tell you, there's nothing better than that feeling of I've done it, because as soon as your kid's born, in particular, maybe you have other people in your life that it's important that you protect them. You should be doing it, and the earlier the better, because the younger you are, the cheaper it is. Makes sense. SelectQuote could save you time and money. Get your free quote at selectquote.com/majority today. That's selectquote.com/majority for your free quote. Don't put off protecting your family for another day. Selectquote.com/majority. Get full details on the example policy at selectquote.com/commercials. Your premium could vary depending on your health, issuing company, and other factors, not available in all states. And lastly, I got to tell you that every 2 seconds, there's a new victim of identity theft, which means a criminal could be spending your money, applying for loans in your name, and even damaging your credit, the good credit you've worked so hard to build. Unfortunately, you can miss certain threats to your identity by just checking bank statements and monitoring your credit. Good thing there's LifeLock Identity Theft Protection. LifeLock uses proprietary technology to detect and alert you on a wide range of identity threats, like your social security number for sale on the dark web. And if you have an issue involving identity theft, one of LifeLock's identity restoration specialists will work to fix it for you. When I was contemplating doing this, I asked people if they had any experience with LifeLock, and I got a couple of emails, and they cited particularly the identity restoration specialists, because that can be a nightmare, I guess, and they needed the help. Of course, no one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses, but with LifeLock, you get identity theft protection and additional features to help protect your devices against cyber threats for as low as $99 a month. $9.99 a month. $9.99 a month. Don't waste another second. LifeLock.com/majority now to save 10% on your first year. That's LifeLock.com/majority for 10% off. LifeLock.com/majority. All right, let's dig into Bernie's announcement. In addition to saying at one point, this time is going to be different because we're going to win. And, look, I am most partial to the proposals that Bernie Sanders has proposed and Elizabeth Warren, more or less by far. They seem to be putting forward, and Bernie is yet to really, I think, roll out any new proposals, but certainly the Medicare for All, that many of the other candidates have signed on to. And Warren putting out proposals like producing generic drugs, like the one that she announced, and we'll talk about it in a bit, universal daycare. These are important proposals to get out into the conversation. And part of the reason why, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this, who have said in many different ways that were the campaign 2 or 3 months longer, that primary campaign, had Bernie Sanders gotten into and decided to run 3 to 6 months earlier and genuinely believed he had a shot at winning when he entered, or even 3 to 6 months, if he had gone in 3 months earlier and he would have picked up that awareness earlier, he could have very well won that primary in 2016. And this time he's going in, and he's going in to win it. And that's what he said in his interview. And that is not, I think people should, have interpreted that as like some type of measure of confidence. And I think the guy has confidence and whatnot. But I think what it is it is a tacit admission that the last time he entered the race was because he was running a message campaign. And this time he's running a race to become the nominee.
Not to mention the president.
Well, and then ultimately the president.
Hashtag Bernie would have won.
Well, like I say,
hashtag Bernie will win.
Martin O'Malley would have won too, I think. But be that as it may, that was then. This is now. Here is Bernie Sanders talking specifically about Howard Schultz. And he had been quiet up to this point about Howard Schultz.
Howard Schultz has now said he would not run as an independent if the Democrats nominate a moderate.
Oh, isn't that nice? Why is Howard Schultz on every television station in this country? Why are you quoting Howard Schultz? Because he's a billionaire, all right? There are a lot of people I know personally who work hard for a living, who make $40,000, $50,000 a year, who know a lot more about politics than, in all due respect, does Mr. Schultz. But because we have a corrupt political system, anybody who is a billionaire, who can throw a lot of TV ads on television suddenly becomes very, very credible. So what Mr. Schultz, what is he, blackmailing the Democratic Party? If you don't nominate Bernie Sanders, he's not going to run? Well, I don't think we should succumb to that kind of blackmail.
The other reason is that he represents an argument that some people make, which is if you're worried about Donald Trump, the Democratic Party, to win voters in various parts of the country, needs to pick somebody who is not so radical. That's also what his theory represents.
Well, I think his deeper theory is, hey, I'm a billionaire, leave me alone. And let me make as much money as I can without paying my fair share of taxes. He's a billionaire, he's thinking of running for president, suddenly he's a very famous guy. That is a problem with our political system.
I mean, that, not terribly different than what we were saying on the day that Howard Schultz was like all of a sudden on every single TV show. Suddenly, because he built up a coffee shop into a big business
which other people have also done.
Yes. That he is perfectly primed to step in and become president and is treated as if he's a serious guy as opposed to, let's say, Donald Trump. And without any prior policy work, it's just that he went in and he bought Steve Schmidt and he bought Bill Burton, literally bought them for millions of dollars. And he bought his credibility and he bought ads and he bought media time. If I buy, I got news for you. If I go buy a 3-page spread in the New York Times, guess what I'm going to get? Somebody's going to write a story about the Majority Report. That's just the fact. And that in and of itself, if it's something as benign as, they did a profile on Sam because maybe it's related to his, $2 million buy of ads or whatever it is. But they did a profile on him. You know what? That doesn't have that great of, it's corrupt, but it's not that relevant. Nobody cares. So what? But when they're doing a profile on this guy because he's going to try and run for president, that's where you have the corruption of the political process. And that is, it's as if Howard Schultz showed up to provide the subtext for a lot of why Bernie's running, which is that we have a system that we have people who have amassed so much money that they have turned us to, they're plutocrats now. They had garnered so much money that they have an outsized power, significantly outsized power politically and socially. And that's the problem. So, I don't know, Bernie, I hope, sent him a muffin basket.
Seriously. God, just to watch that, whatever his name is, news guy sit there with a straight face saying, Howard Schultz represents an argument that a third-party billionaire is going to beat Trump. Like, God damn it, that sucks.
Well, the only even sort of like rationale, I should say, for Schultz's candidacy is this idea that the Democrats can't become too economically left because that won't appeal to the voters who supposedly voted Trump because they wanted to screw over the establishment, right? Like, that's the argument. And even in articulating it, it makes no sense.
Yeah, how'd that go the last time around?
Well, but put that aside for a moment. Just the argument, because it's all you put out there without any data. There's no like, this poll says that. It's just an argument that ostensibly sounds reasonable. But if you genuinely articulate the argument, of course it's absurd.
Yeah, and actually there is data that contradicts that.
Well, of course. But they can't get into data when they talk about it, or they won't be able to get the question out of their mouth.
Well, because it's not the data that's leading to the prominence of the arguments. It's the money behind them.
Yes. And this is what is both so gross and so powerful about Bernie Sanders' ability to raise the kind of money that he raised in the first 24 hours and in the week subsequent to his announcement. Like, this is, if you tell me how much money the candidates have on hand in terms of cash 9 months from now, 10 months from now, after Iowa, after New Hampshire, 13, 14 months out, after Super Tuesday, well, I guess 12 months out now, basically. If you tell me how much money, cash on hand, the candidates have on March 10th or March 6th, I can tell you who the top 4 candidates are going to be, and maybe 3. That's just the reality of this process. When people get out of the race, it's going to be because they don't have cash. Sanders has announced he has over 1 million volunteers that have signed up.
Hell yeah.
For the 2020 campaign. And they are in every single congressional district. 1 million volunteers already. That's nuts. So we'll see. You know, this is, and I'll tell you that you look at, there was polls that came out in New Hampshire, and he's got a decent sized lead there. Probably bigger than most of the states that he will have leads in. But 20 to 25% is a number that could win a lot of these primaries. Kamala Harris is going to be, has a structural advantage on some level because of California as part of Super Tuesday. And although, you know, Iowa and New Hampshire, then South Carolina, then Super Tuesday, March 3rd, I believe it is, next year, 2020. And coming out of those, it's not a winner-take-all type of situation. Coming out of those Super Tuesday, we're going to have a very good sense of like who the top 5 or 6 candidates are. And money plays a big part, and obviously volunteers do too. But
I think Kamala Harris is the one to beat. I think Bernie and her are going to fight it out.
You know, it's tough. You never know. You never know. Like somebody could pop out of Iowa that could be surprising, come in like a surprising second. A Rick Santorum situation. And
I've been there.
Who knows?
I've had those.
I don't even want to. Oh, jeez. I know what you mean by that, and I don't even want to know that. All right, let's talk about Elizabeth Warren for a bit, because she has come out with 2 basically, she came out with a big proposal on the same day that Bernie announced, which was one of my favorite days in politics in a long time. On Monday, she announced that her presidential campaign will not have private fundraisers or one-on-one meetings with big donors. That's a big deal. And I imagine Bernie Sanders will probably follow suit. I don't know that he hadn't already there, but it's going to be interesting to see if that's the case with like a Kamala Harris or with a Cory Booker or a Kristen Gillibrand, or if Joe Biden jumps in, a Joe Biden. It'd be a good thing if they followed suit. It would begin to, in some way, untether their decision-making from big donors. Maybe at the very least it would give, just some indication that, they're open to it, let's say. But here is Elizabeth Warren, who also came out with a plan, like I said last week, on a universal childcare. And the plan basically has 4 elements. One, it's free for families who live at 200% or less of the poverty line. So, family, I don't know what that is. For family 4, poverty line, somewhere, I think, in the 20s. And double that, you get free, you get free childcare. Families above 200% of the poverty line pay a sliding scale between 0 and 7% of their income on childcare. Right now, I think the average family pays somewhere around like 10%, at least. I mean, childcare is expensive, super expensive. And nobody pays over 7% of their income on childcare. And this would be financed by the wealth tax. And the cost over the course of 10 years is about $700 billion. So $70 billion a year to invest in a program that has huge returns for the kids and for the parents. And frankly, this is before you start to measure. A lot of people are going to go, there are women who want to work. Men maybe who want to work. Who are responsible for their child care. There are men and women who want to take care of their parents. But there are people who are going to go back into the workforce, and it's going to generate revenue there. But just in terms of the number, let me tell you how small $70 billion is relative to what we're used to paying for stuff. If you go back and you Google $70 billion, we had a perfect example of like how dramatic an increase in spending $70 billion a year is. And that is how much we added to the military budget last year. $70 billion a year. And virtually no one questioned it.
Was it 700?
$70 billion a year. 700 over 10. $70 billion a year. They raised it. There wasn't a moment's of debate. There was no debate. They didn't have to get people on board. They didn't have to prove the efficacy of it. They didn't have to make a case that where our national security is compromised. Nothing. Just penciled it in. I think it may have made 1 or 2 mentions on the nightly news. And that's it. This could be done literally with a snap of a finger. And it is also something that we have done before. Between 1943 and 46, the Lanham Act provided universal child care because obviously we needed women to go and work in the factories for the war effort. And they ramped this up in a matter of months. This was not like we need 15 years to plan for this. It was just boom. I mean, New York City, within a year, got UPK up and running. And frankly, that's an even harder thing to do because you're dealing with, people who not only need to know how to care for children, but need to be able to teach them. We came very close to this type of bill in 1970-something, early 70s. Both houses of Congress had passed a bill very similar to Warren's, and Dick Nixon vetoed it on Pat Buchanan's say-so. So, great proposal, and I want more of this. And the beauty of having Elizabeth Warren proposing these things in this race, It's not just that she might become president and be able to actually execute them, but that others are going to have to follow suit. That others are going to either adopt and sign on to her plan, or they're going to have to beat it. And so this is just the opening salvo. Good for her.
So I just want to say, I think this is a huge step in the right direction. We need childcare. We need it to be affordable, preferably free. I do fear that this program will undermine itself from the beginning if it insists on means testing. And whether or not you think that the current amount that people are being asked to pay for childcare is fair, what happens when you means test things is a few things, right? It becomes vulnerable to attack. So suddenly those
I don't think this is means tested.
It is.
No, you're eligible. Everyone's eligible.
Yeah, but the amount you pay for it is based on your income.
That's true.
That's means testing.
But that's a sliding scale. It's slightly different.
Because they still test your means, right?
Well, they do test your means, but Social Security is also means tested in that regard too. If you're saying that,
I just think
everybody doesn't get the same amount of Social Security.
Anytime you make people jump through extra hoops to access a program, you're effectively policing the poor, whether or not you intend to. You are limiting access. And this is something the Clintons talked about very explicitly with means testing in the 90s. I'm not saying that this is identical to that, but it creates resentment on the part of people who make more and maybe have to pay more. And it leaves your programs more vulnerable to attack than if they were a universal program. Free childcare for everybody, no questions asked.
I think there's something to the idea that a universal benefit that is the same for everybody is probably more durable politically. But a means test is a determination of eligibility. Everyone is eligible for this. The question is not eligibility, which is what means test means. The question is, how much of a subsidy do you get?
Yeah, it's still not quite.
Well, I mean, that's just
universal.
I'm just talking about what
program.
It is.
And we have the money,
it is
like
not,
you just said.
It is not a universal free childcare program. That is true. That is true.
And like we have the money. So why, given that fact, would you create any kind of hoops for people to jump through or any extra limitations?
I think ultimately, having universal childcare is the best way to go. And like I said, when I was talking about it, this is the opening proposal. So there are going to be some people who are going to want to beat it. And there are going to be others who are going to sign on to it. So yes.
I mean, I hope that Bernie comes out with a universal plan because we really, really need one. And it's like, even if it's good at the start, I think a universal program is like building your house out of stones, right? And a means tested one, or whatever you want to call it.
It's sliding scale.
Okay. It's like building your house out of sticks. And even if it's the same house to begin with, one is going to be more vulnerable to the elements as time goes on.
Yes. I mean, I think the durability of a completely universal plan that puts everybody on the same footing, I think is there. And I think probably my guess would be that you're still going to have a significant percentage of people who are going to want to go to private childcare. You're still going to have a significant amount of people who are going to have nannies as opposed to send their kids to daycare. And in some respects, the quality of the program may be better if it has people, higher on the income ladder because they will be more. They tend to have more political power, and they'll demand a higher level of quality.
Yeah, it's similar to public schools now, right?
I mean, now what happens is because it's not public schools are not funded from a federal tax, it's a function of the wealth in that specific locality. So this is funded from the wealth tax. So you theoretically would not have that type of disparity in terms of location. And theoretically, you wouldn't have, I mean, the difference is that you're going to have kids who are coming from areas of less wealth. And presumably you want to send your kid to childcare that's closest to you, right? And you're going to have kids who are going to have more social issues because they're living in poverty. They may not get the same nutrition at home. They may not get exposed to the same things at home. They may not, maybe both their parents are, are working, 2 jobs, or one of their parents is working 2 jobs. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. And the theory is that, and so, there may be kids who have are more problematic in the context of a daycare, but we're talking about daycare. And so you don't have the same necessarily, you're trying to socialize kids at most in these situations. And the upshot is that if it's completely free for people living, with 200% of poverty, theoretically, you're going to have a lot of parents who are going to have more time to spend with their children because they're not going to have to work that second job. Or they're going to be able to work while their kids are at daycare as opposed to working when the other parent comes home. I mean, so there's a whole host of benefits. And yes, I think that there's a decent point to be made that, folks living above, 200% of poverty should get it as free as, or completely expense free as those living below. But I'm not terribly concerned about I'm not convinced about the durability in that situation. This is not a means-tested program. This is available to everyone. Everyone's expense is capped on this. Everyone's going to get some measure of subsidy. So it is not that you are ever ineligible for this. That is what means testing means. That's just the definition. And so I don't know if there's as much data on a sliding scale durability as we talk about means testing. Because, Social Security theoretically, right, is a sliding scale. It caps out at one point. You have a maximum amount of money that you're going to get paid out in your retirement. So I don't know. It's a good question. And certainly more is better. But this is pretty good.
We have the money. But yes, more like this. We're definitely on the right track. We need it.
We have an entrepreneur on Fox Business talking about what she thinks should be how she thinks childcare should be taken care of.
Yeah, there is. This is the thing about childcare, folks, is that you don't want the safety net to turn into a hammock.
Yeah, I'm probably going to get a lot of heat for saying this, but the reality is that the best child care and the best early learning that a kid can get is from his family, whether that is his mom or his dad or a grandparent. That is the best outcome for children when it comes to early education and early care and learning. Now, I understand that that is not everybody's choice, but at some point, individual responsibility has to come into play here. If you want to make a different choice, you have to be responsible for the financial implication of those choices. It is not the government's role to do that. It is not your neighbor's role. It is not the millionaire's role to do that. If you want to make a different choice and you don't want to or feel like you're unable to care for your children, you have to think through the implications of that.
Now, that's Carol J. Roth. I hope she doesn't have a child because I don't know what she's doing at work. Now, presumably, Carol Roth, who is a radio host writes columns and goes on TV, doesn't have a child because she would have to be at home working for her, presumably her husband, right? But that's just absurd.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the guy who doesn't think we should pay for kids' school lunches. Remember that guy?
Paul
Called
Ryan.
in? Well, I guess it's a lot of guys, but
Right.
the particular one that we talked to, and then I asked him, what would happen if people just stopped having kids? And he was like, oh, well, the human race would end, whatever.
Well, the amazing thing is that this argument that she's making is not going to appeal to anybody outside of that bubble. I mean, that's the thing, is that this is not, and there's undoubtedly people who don't think that the women should stay at home, because that's what this is, right? This is just a women should be in the kitchen argument, sort of dressed up with a little bit of like, it's about the kids, though.
Yeah, you kind of have to make it economically possible for women to be at home with their kids, though, too.
That's right. You gotta.
She calls herself a recovering investment banker.
Ah, geez. Oh, Tucker Carlson had a bit about this too, where he said that it's going to, go along with this like neoliberal globalist feminism, right? So like all of the white women are not going to be home with their kids like they should be, while their husbands are, earning a family wage with the jobs that Trump brought back. They're going to be at work while their kids are taken care of by illegal immigrants.
Well, how would illegal immigrants get jobs in childcare that is subsidized by the federal government?
The liberals are going to give them jobs.
That's
Job
gonna be
guarantee for
fascinating.
illegal immigrants. That's
MS-13
like
members are
the
gonna be
number one plank in Bernie's platform.
I mean, this is what's interesting, though, about this critique of this. Here it is.
Back to work as good little servants. American Dream is outsourcing their upbringing to government caretakers while their parents scurry back to work as good little servants of globalized market capitalism. The need for more government daycare specialists will no doubt be used to justify more immigration. And so the cycle, as you can see, is complete. The Democratic Party started by outsourcing manufacturing, you remember that. Then they outsourced farm labor and yard work, and now they've decided to outsource parenting. Raising your own kids, Elizabeth Warren is telling us, is a job Americans just won't do. Huh.
Well, now, this is just unbelievable. Obviously, Tucker's wife must be raising his kids, I would imagine.
Oh no, all their wives work at like Goldman Sachs. These dudes.
Well, but even putting that aside, what it really does is also show you and our guest is going to talk about this, I think, on some level tomorrow. It also shows you the economic foundations of sexism and misogyny, right? Like this just makes it completely obvious and naked that the idea why you want to make it too expensive for women to go to work. Now, of course, this is completely ignoring the reality of a huge swath of men and women, right? Where it's not a question of, can I get to work? It's just a question of, will I ever see the kid, right? Because many of these people are working. These couples are working two jobs, even if they have the kid at home. It's just that they're leaving at night. Or maybe one of the parents is working two jobs and never sees the kids. But he's going to ignore those because he wants to talk about the real Americans. But even when in the context of his real Americans, it shows that how economic deprivation or the concept of economic coercion reinforces these social structures that folks like Tucker Carlson, who apparently believes very strongly in the notion of a patriarchy, although I'm sure he would say, like, no, I'm perfectly fine with the husband staying at home and the wife going out to work, despite the fact that she would make significantly, 10, 15% less than the husband in the job force. But nevertheless, they know what where the numbers land on this. And this is the way that they use economic coercion to subjugate women, because it fits their religiously formed code of how the family should look and act.
Yeah, and he uses his disingenuous critique of capitalism once more to try to advance a different version of capitalism that he thinks is better, and he's not going to say it, but whiter.
Whiter and more Christian.
I mean, he did say it, right? He talked about immigrants.
And more religious, I should probably say.
Because, it does suck that a lot of couples don't really have a choice. Everyone has to work all the time and not spend time with their kids, and everyone's tired. It feels like shit. But the answer to that is not more economic coercion, generally speaking.
Indeed. All right. We got to take a break here and go to the fun half. But before we do, what's that? Oh, yeah. Before we do that, though, I think we should do the Bregman thing, because I want everybody to see this. I mean, we're going to, in the fun half, we'll talk about the DI-FI meeting with young people from same organization, Sunrise, I think it was, same organization that occupied Nancy Pelosi's office and is currently, I think at this moment, occupying Mitch McConnell's office. We'll talk about that in the fun half. But you'll recall, I don't know, about a week or two ago, 3 weeks ago, we played a clip of this guy, Bregman.
Rutger Bregman.
Rutger Bregman. He is a Danish history professor, and he was at Davos. And it didn't get the same coverage as what was it? Who's the first guy?
Anand Giridharadas.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's actually Dutch.
Oh, Dutch. Okay. And it didn't get the same coverage, but I think we even included in the clip. But he made a very similar point where he was like, we're out here at Davos, and they're talking about all these different things. And the one thing that nobody's paying attention to is taxes. The rich need to pay more taxes, period. And so that caused quite a stir. And this is where Tucker Carlson's veneer that Jamie was just alluding to gets ripped off, where he pretends like, Tucker wants to have this, is trying to develop an image that makes it look like he's taking on the establishment. Because he knows no matter what happens to Trump, there's going to be a bunch of Trump voters out there who are going to be disaffected. And these are the guys that he's applying, and make no mistake about it, Tucker's playing a role. And it's not completely disingenuous, because he's also, at the heart of this role is sort of the same thing that I think Pat Buchanan was running on 30 years ago, which is a fundamentalist, a religious fundamentalist worldview that sees some elements of capitalism as profane because they undercut the religious worldview that they want. And so he's able to talk a good game about this stuff unless it starts to dig and cut a little bit too close to the bone.
Yeah.
And so he brings on this guy Bregman, Rutger Bregman, after Bregman's sort of, I guess, his moment at Davos. And Bregman does something that maybe he could do it because I think he was actually, he was in Europe, I believe, when he was doing this. He wasn't in studio. I don't know where he was, but he had access to the feed in a way that most people don't. And somebody was recording it with his phone. And we had noticed this before we left for vacation, that Bregman had tweeted at Tucker Carlson, how come you're not going to play the interview that we did? And we're wondering what it was. Well, now this obtained this footage and shows how the full segment between Bregman and Tucker Carlson went, and we're gonna play it. sorry now this, but this is stuff is more important than just the accruing the hits.
Fighters conference, and no one's allowed to speak about water. That's one of the great moments, maybe the great moment in Davos history. Rutger Bregman is the author of Utopia for Realists, and he joins us now. Mr. Bregman, I can't stop laughing just listening to that. And part of it makes me wonder, are you the first person ever to note that people are flying private to talk about global warming and that none of them mention tax avoidance? Has anyone ever said that before at Davos that you know of?
Pause it for 1 second. So now on this, you cannot see Tucker on it. All he is in the studio looking at the feed that's going. So you just hear Tucker.
Sure, I'm not an expert on Davos history, but it is a bit hypocritical, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And others have noted that. We've noted it on this show. We've just never gone to Davos and said it out loud as you did. So if I was wearing a hat,
I just like you can hear, like I can see Tucker. There's a picture here of him, but I could see Tucker really enjoying this and thinking like, oh my God, this is cool for me. I found this guy and I'm totally on top of this.
Has he always been this much of a speed freak?
take it off to you. What response did you get?
I mean, they were not very happy with me, but I'm just I think a random Dutch historian who's basically saying whatever around the globe is thinking. You know, the vast majority of Americans, for years and years now, according to the polls, including Fox News viewers and including Republicans, are in favor of higher taxes on the rich. You know, higher inheritance taxes, higher top marginal tax rates, higher wealth taxes. It's all really mainstream. But no one's saying that at Davos, just as no one's saying it on Fox News, right? And I think the explanation for that is quite simple, is that most of the people in Davos, but also here on this channel, have been bought by the billionaire class. You know, you're not meant to say these things. So I just went there and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to say it, just as I'm saying it right here on this channel.
Well, what was interesting, I thought, about what you said, was you noticed something. I mean, many people have called for higher taxes, but very few
Well, not on this channel, is it? I mean, almost all of the pundits on this channel for years have been against higher taxes, right? Even though the vast majority of Americans is in favor of it.
I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to know how many hours of Fox you've watched, but I'm interested in what you said about tax avoidance.
Pause it. Hold on. Now it's Tucker realizes, like, at first he tries to ignore where he was going, and then he realizes, like, okay, and then you can hear him like, and he as he's starting to realize, like, oh, this is going sideways, and how am I going to bring this back? I'm just going to have like a little bit of like shot across the bow, because most of the guests that they have on that Tucker's not sure of, this is the way of Tucker like corralling. This is like this. I sent the sheepdog out to push him back in line, and apparently it's not going to work.
I mean, I don't know. It would be interesting to know how many hours of Fox you've watched, but I'm interested in what you said about tax avoidance. So
yeah.
I mean, just because someone faces a specific tax rate does not mean that person pays that tax rate at all. I don't think Netflix, for example, paid any taxes last year at all. So what would you do specifically to make certain that this class of people pays what they're supposed to pay?
Well, it's about multiple things. So we should really crack down on tax paradises and on tax avoidance. That's a major issue. But it's also about having higher taxes. So in the 1950s, for example, in the 1960s, in the golden age of capitalism, as historians called it, we had top marginal tax rate for the very rich of about, 70, 80, 90%. Actually under Eisenhower, the Republican president. And this was also, one of the best periods in American history. Same is true for the UK and the rest of Europe. So as a historian, for me, it's all not, it's really not rocket science. We should just go back to simple and straightforward solutions from the past.
Right, but this country was sustained, and since you're a historian, I guess you would know this, sustained by an industrial economy at the time that was broad and deep. That created a middle class. That doesn't exist anymore. So it's an entirely different economy. I wish it did exist.
Oh well, but that's not really an issue. I mean,
work the same way with an entirely different economy?
Well, I think it would. I mean, America is still pretty much the most powerful country in the world, right? So if it if it really would want to, it could easily crack down on tax paradises. But the thing is, I mean, you guys have brought into power a president that doesn't even want to show its own tax returns. I mean, who knows how many billions he has hidden in the Cayman Islands or in Bermuda. So I think the issue really is one of corruption and of people being bribed and of not being, you know, not talking about the real issues. What the family, you know, what the Murdochs basically want you to do is to scapegoat immigrants instead of talking about tax avoidance. So I'm glad you're now finally raising the issue, but that's what's been happening for the past couple of years.
And I'm taking orders from the Murdochs. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, it doesn't work that directly. But I mean, you've been part of the Cato Institute, right? You've been a senior fellow there for years. You've been taking their dirty money. They're funded by cock billionaires, you know?
Wait, why don't you tell me how it does work?
Well, it works by you taking their dirty money. It's as easy as that. I mean, you are a millionaire funded by billionaires. That's what you are. And I'm glad you now finally jumped the bandwagon, you know, of people like Bernie Sanders and AOC. But you're not part of the solution, Mr. Carlson. You're part of the problem, actually.
AOC, wait, but can I just say, and
it's true, right? It's true, right? That all the anchors on Fox, they're all millionaires. How is this possible? Well, it's very easy. You're just not talking about certain things.
Fox doesn't even play where you are.
It doesn't play where you are. Well, have you heard of the internet? I can watch things whatever I want, you know? I have, actually. I can't say I'm a great fan of your show, but I do my homework when you invite me on your show. So, I mean, you're probably not going to air this, but I went to Davos to speak truth to power, and I'm doing exactly the same thing right now. You might not like it, but you're a millionaire funded by billionaires, and that's the reason why you're not talking about these issues.
But I am talking about these issues.
Yeah, only now. Come on, you jumped the bandwagon. You're all like, oh, I'm against the globalist elite, blah, blah, blah. It's not very convincing, to be honest.
Why don't you go yourself, you tiny brain, and I hope this gets picked up, because you're a moron. I tried to give you a hearing, but you were too annoying for me.
You can't handle the criticism, can you?
That's how you do Fox.
Oh.
You have to go on expecting to never be invited back, and you've done it right.
The tricky part is it's hard to get that type of footage. Like, I think you need to be like an American, in most American stringers, essentially, places where you go in, they either do not have that monitor available, or it's conceivable to me there could be another person. I'm presumably that was not him video, although it's conceivable to me that he also videotaped it after the fact, that they ran back the video because, you know, it's different in a foreign country. But if you get the right person, but that was pretty sweet. And you know what? Here's what I'm going to say. I don't think Tucker Carlson hoped that it get picked up. He said it, but I don't actually believe that that was the case.
Yeah, but he comes off so not owned in that video and definitely not mad.
But that's the thing too, is it got under his skin so badly. Because he was so excited up front. Like, I have squared the circle. Like, I have been able to bring it together. I got the guy who criticized power at Davos, and this is how, with my jujitsu, I turn it into some type of like pro, you know, women need to stay in the kitchen type of white people are great narrative. And he just got faced. That was really a work of art, I have to say. Very impressive. All right, we got to take a break, head into the fun half. Just a reminder, folks, you can get this show commercial free by becoming a member. Go to jointhemajorityreport.com, become a member for only nickels a day, and we give you the first half commercial free. We generally don't go this long, but, you know, first day back type of situation. And then we give you more content after that. Another, I don't know, hour and a half. Sometimes 2, for God's sakes. And so your support keeps this show functioning and working. Don't forget, Michael will probably be back from his extended vacation, I guess, tomorrow. I don't know.
I think so.
Maybe for because TMBS is tomorrow, right? So we know he'll be back by 7 p.m. tomorrow night. You can watch it live on the TMBS YouTube channel. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Don't forget, not only is it delicious coffee, but it's also a great company. Jamie, the Antifada, my understanding is that you actually worked on your vacation?
Indeed.
Wow, that's not a vacation. Jamie.
Well, I was very sick for most of it, but I managed to bookend that with some very productive recording sessions. So I'm just going to read a little blurb about it. So here we go. On this week's Antifada, we did something a little bit different. For all of you theory heads out there, Sean was joined by our comrades at Swampside Chats and Brett from Rev Left Radio to do a deep dive on communization theory, an ultra-left tendency that came out of the France post-May 68. Came out of France post-May 68. Pretty exciting time in France. And is now a specter. Indeed. Very good. And is now très bien. Is now a specter haunting the Anglophone world. Get the bong rips ready. You're going to need them. We also recorded yesterday with Hamilton Nolan from formerly of Gawker, now of Splinter. We talked about union organizing in the media and the future of the labor movement in the U.S. So that's coming out on Wednesday of this week. And I also still recommend our episode with Corey Pine that came out like a week or so ago and didn't really have a chance to promote it because we were on break.
There you go.
Most recently on Literary Hangover, The Unparalleled Adventures of One Hans Pfaall by Edgar Allan Poe. It's early sci-fi, maybe the first, maybe not, probably not the first, but an early version of sci-fi where a guy goes into debt and makes his creditors help him construct a hot air balloon and then blows his creditors up on the launch pad as he takes a hot air balloon to the moon.
Smart play. Hey, folks, thanks again to LifeLock Identity Theft Protection for supporting today's show. Of course, no one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions at all businesses. With LifeLock, you get identity theft protection and additional features to help protect your devices against cyber threats for as low as $9.99 a month. Don't waste another second. Visit lifelock.com/majority now to save 10% on your first year. That's lifelock.com/majority for 10% off. lifelock.com/majority. Don't forget, tomorrow, go out, vote in that special election. Public advocate, Nomi Konst, needs your vote. Would be the first time I think we have someone in that position who has really owes no one anything in the developer world and owes nothing to anyone in the New York State Democratic apparatus. And that, I think, is pretty powerful stuff.
She can go Rutger Bregman on their ass.
She could totally go Rutger Bregman on them. I mean, except for like the, weird pronunciation of things like Davos. And
yeah,
that was, I kept waiting for Tucker to actually say at one point, like, how come you keep mispronouncing it?
That's what Tucker should have done. Just make fun of his accent.
Yeah, learn to speak English.
Weird. All right, folks, see you to Fun F. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501457. 2, 38, 56, 27, 1/2, 5/8, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Let's go right to the phones. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? I think I know.
Good afternoon, Sam. This is John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. How are you, sir? How's things going?
It's going great. Going great.
You must be very
hope you enjoyed
excited.
your vacation.
I did.
Great to have you back.
It's great to have you back.
Last Tuesday was the best day of 2019. Bernie confirmed what so many of us hoped was coming. Raising $6 million in 24 hours was awesome. Codified how strong his supporters feel about his candidacy. I'm looking forward to his town hall tonight on CNN at 8 p.m. Eastern. I agree with Van Jones when he says, in some ways, Bernie Sanders never stopped running for president. Jones also stated, now that the Democratic Party from top to bottom seems to have taken on almost all of those ideas. Now, I definitely disagree with him on that assertion, and this has been the greatest problem with the traditional media coverage. A handful of contenders have superficially adopted some of Bernie's ideas, but the biggest story of the primary so far is that the progressive challengers who the media say share Bernie's values overall are not pushing his ideology, and this is personified by their lack of commitment to Medicare for all. In 2016, Super Tuesday, which was held on March 1st, was devastating to the Sanders campaign. There were great victories in Minnesota, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Vermont, but there are also 30-point losses in southern states like Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia that put Bernie in the deep hole mathematically that he never recovered from. Clinton also won Massachusetts by 2.4 points, just to throw that in. 2020's primary schedule is also a challenge. Super Tuesday is being held on March 3rd, and all of the same states I mentioned previously, plus North Carolina and California, which is obviously Harris' home state, are going to take place then. Colorado still hasn't determined if their caucus will be held on March 3rd or the 17th, and Arkansas will move its primary to May 19th. So Bernie said he'll be focusing more on winning black and women voters, which is definitely a smart move. But a big challenge is winning white Democratic voters in the South who are more conservative. Now, Biden has a 36-14 lead over Bernie in a Change Research poll of South Carolina that is taken mostly before Bernie announced. The good news that Bernie has a 1-point lead over Harris. And if you look at the Change Research poll of California, Bernie is only down to 6 to Harris and Biden, who was at 26%. Bernie's at 20. And in the latest poll in New Hampshire, I think what you mentioned earlier, Bernie's up 27 to 25%. And as much as I admire Bernie, I think he's making a strategic error by continuing to talk about voting for the politician who is in the best position to beat Trump. I understand that Democrats think this is the biggest factor in the election, but people are putting their faith in something that's not concrete. Issues should drive voter interest. And in most hypotheticals, Bernie and Biden...
Wait a second. Let me ask you a question about that. You say issues should drive... voters, what is it? Their votes?
Their interest.
Yeah, their interest. Now, I think you and I agree with that. But we don't live in the world that John from San Antonio and Sam from Brooklyn think should be. We live in the world that is. And while I definitely espouse the notion that I think really, I don't know that we have a candidate yet in this race who can't win, frankly, against Trump. There are a lot of voters out there, and we know this, right? Like, we've seen the polls. In fact, I think the majority of Democrats would vote for someone who they think can win over someone whose policies they like. And if it's not the majority, then it was close. I can't remember what the number was, like 47% or something like that. Maybe it was a plurality. And so he's got to address those people. He's got to address those people. And there's one of two ways you do that. You can say everybody can win, or you can say, like, I'll let other people make the case for themselves as to whether they can win. I'm just going to say I can win.
Right, but he keeps saying who's going to be in the best position to beat Trump. And, and his numbers have been very good against Trump. They've been very similar to Biden's, but Biden's have been slightly better. And so what I'm saying is, if he's going to use that metric, he's already, kind of losing in that.
I see what you're saying.
And so what he should be saying,
he'll shift if Biden gets in the race.
Right. Just talk about issues and how he's the best.
Or
candidate.
just stay with I know I can beat Donald Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, as he's trying to, get more black voters, I mean, obviously, black voters despise Trump, in huge numbers, and so that's part of the strategy. The more he's talked about Trump quite a bit, a lot more than I thought he was going to, and I think he's trying to cater to the black audience, especially in the South, and I think that's a good strategy.
So the fact of the matter is that the African American community is more vulnerable than the white male community in the context of a Donald Trump presidency. Both are subjected to the same economic deprivation, but you got a record number of hate groups who've grown up under the Trump administration. And so, yes, that is a good strategy. I also think, people should keep in mind this, right? That if Joe Biden gets in, Joe Biden could be the best thing that happens to Bernie Sanders. Because if Joe Biden gets in the race, Kamala Harris may have a lot of trouble walking away with California. And the thing is, this is a double-edged sword for her. California, theoretically, right, is a big, that California is, on Super Tuesday, is a big help to her campaign. But she's also in danger of underperforming there. The expectations are going to be high. Right now, you're going to hear the rest of the candidates say, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't even go to California. Because Kamala Harris probably has this whole thing wrapped up. If Joe Biden enters the race, it's quite possible you're going to see something like some of her vote gets split with Joe Biden. Now, maybe Biden takes a little bit from Bernie, but I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think there's a big portion of Bernie's vote that is like, I want to vote for, like, I'm in this to vote for the old white guy. I think there's a lot of Bernie voters who are like, I'm going to vote for him despite the fact that he's an old white guy. And with Joe Biden, I think some of the appeal is like, I want an old white guy. And so it's going to be interesting.
Biden will definitely, split the centrist, and especially if Beto gets in also, it's going to be even more of a split. So that's going to definitely benefit Bernie. Yep. But
the more the better in this clown
that
car.
First Tuesday with all the conservatives in the South, and how much of the black vote can he actually get? That's a big question, and in California, that's also a big question. So that's really an incredibly important day for Bernie, that Super Tuesday. So also on the 60 vote cloture rule for legislation, I see that Bernie's kind of walking away from it. He was very strong in his position in 2013. And do you feel he's doing that just because he's hedging politically due to increased scrutiny that position would take?
The Senate rule? Well, I mean, I think everybody is trying to, everybody's trying to sort of, in this race, we're going to see is going to try and file down some of their sharp edges. And for some people, it's going to be the sharp edges that seem too aggressive in one way. And for some people, it's going to be sharp edges that seem too complacent and laid back in others. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I think this is probably like, look, I think I would imagine that if I was sitting around a table with Bernie Sanders and we were like, what are we going to run on? Well, we're going to run on, Medicare for all. We're going to run on, and who knows what the other proposals that he's going to unleash. I said, where should we be on the filibuster? And it's like, you know what? Maybe we don't stick our neck out on the filibuster right now. Like, maybe that's not the most important thing to be running on. Like, how many votes is that going to get us? The credibility that taking that position gives us full-throatedly, we don't need, because we have that credibility already. I don't know. I mean, this is all speculation. That's all I'm saying. So appreciate the call, John. You must be very, very happy.
Yeah, I am very happy.
All right, good.
All right, thank you, Sam.
The way we like it around here.
From San Antonio, what is he feeling? Nobody knows. Go to him for analysis of elections. Don't go to him for analysis of...
Okay, there we go. Let's go to 610 phone. Where are you calling from?
You know who it is, Sam. It's Mike from PA.
Mike
How are you?
from PA. How are you, sir? What's on your mind?
You're just stacking all the boring horse race calls, run one right after the other.
Dude, I take them as they come in.
I just wanted to call in and say we missed you all. It was the longest week of my life.
I hope you listened to lots of Antifada and Literary Hangover.
Well, we also had shows. I mean, we had shows.
Not the fun half.
Oh, no, I know. But the pre-recording just isn't the same.
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like drinking Pepsi when you want a Coke. It's just not the same. But the community...
There was a couple of very interesting interviews, incidentally. I mean, Mike, not for nothing.
Well, the community got together and we recorded like a random scream into the ether about this Bernie race. And you guys seem to have the perfect ability to find when news is going to happen and then be gone for a week.
Well, we have followed the exact same schedule since this show has launched, which is the New York City Department of Education calendar. Because I gotta deal with the kids.
Yeah, we should really make a law that nothing is allowed to happen when Sam's kids are off school.
There you go.
And I just wanted to talk more about Bernie, and organizing for him and everything. But just like the election, taking a good look at it and being sane and not letting ourselves slip into some narratives that had bearing in 2016, but have no bearing in 2020 because we have a totally different situation going on.
Right.
Like, for example, people talk about, African American vote. It's very important. Of course it is. But Bernie was running as an unknown against somebody who had pretty much every single member of the Democratic establishment and the elite behind her and had a huge name recognition advantage. And traditionally, African American voters tend to cluster around voters or politicians that have long-term credibility and a name ID. And so that was the case in 2016. Now, if you actually look at the polls and the numbers, he's doing very well with African Americans already. There is no significant drop off.
I think people made the mistake of underestimating the deep relationships the Clintons had with much of the African American community leadership
in the South. Especially
in the South, especially in the South, but broadly speaking, and they had been major forces in the Democratic Party politics for multiple decades, and Bill Clinton was considered, rightly or wrongly, was at least branded as the first African American president. Which seems sort of both offensive and ridiculous in retrospect, but that was the reality of it. And they had gone around and they had done this multiple times, and had developed deep relationships. I mean, both in his two campaigns and in her one campaign. So there was deep ties, and there's no one who has those relationships in this field. Nobody does.
Well, can I say something on that point? Like, we got to remember, like, when we talk about the Black community, or so to speak, it's not a monolith, right? Black people in this country are not a monolith. In addition to being, individuals, there are lots and lots of divisions along lines of class position,
well, of course,
along lines of age, and when we look at these polls, they are in some ways encouraging when you see that, Black voters actually view Bernie much more favorably than white voters do. But if you look at the smaller number of old Southern Black people who go to church and vote in a lot of primaries, then that number does go down. So,
and part of that, there's some... Well, there's some good arguments, it seems to me, because I think particularly that segment of the Black community sees the Democratic Party as a incredibly important institution in their lives, one that they would have significant anxiety about being weakened. And which makes complete sense.
Well, and like older people have different politics than younger people as well. Like it's something as simple as criminal justice reform, right? I think older people have a very different view on, say, Kamala Harris's record on criminal justice than younger people do.
Yes. For older African Americans, the Democratic Party was a very, very important institution. That had incredibly material implications in their daily lives, particularly from the South.
And so what Bernie has done, in the intervening time is he's recognized that, hey, I really underperformed with African American voters, especially in the South, and he has moved to mitigate that. And he's largely been successful because, we have to give credit to Hillary Clinton for her strengths. Her strengths was a long-term institutional trust with partisan Democrats. So now that she's not running, we have to look at the actual facts on the ground, and he's way out ahead. He's a prohibitive front runner at this point, which obviously, it's probably scary to hear that, but that's what the facts show. I mean, I look at Biden, and his support is incredibly soft.
Yeah.
It's amongst people that are the least likely to vote in a Democratic primary. It is not really backed up by any kind of like real love for him. It's low intensity, and best of all, the number one second choice of Biden voters is Bernie Sanders. So if Biden were not to run, Bernie would probably gain another 10 or 15 points in the polls from his current position. Right now, you're looking at his floor, not his ceiling. And a lot of people and pundits in the media look at that Bernie number, and they're trying to make it a ceiling, sort of like they did with Trump. It's actually kind of eerie how similar the arguments are. You can go and take articles from 2015 about Trump, because Trump basically got in the lead in around April of 2015 and never trailed. Yet if you read the punditry about it, it was like a surprise that he won. So there was a real resistance to looking at the facts, the numbers, and the reality. And you can't really deny Bernie's fundraising, his volunteer signups. No one else has come anywhere close to that. And it's relative. We've talked about it before, but it's just a fact on the ground that he has that support.
Yeah.
And you look at Elizabeth Warren voters, Bernie Sanders is overwhelmingly her number two choice of her voters. So if she were to drop out, he gains about like 60% of her voters, which when you have 10 people running, that's a significant fragment that are going to one candidate. So, I mean,
she's going to be in.
Touched on
her fundraising has not been great, but I have a feeling that she's going to be in there. That her strategy is going to be to hang in there as long as she can, and see if somebody doesn't fall apart, because she she can fill a couple lanes, it seems to me, Elizabeth Warren, and if Kamala Harris drops out, Elizabeth Warren, I think, is going to pick up some of her votes. If Bernie Sanders drops out, Elizabeth Warren's going to pick up some of his votes. There's not a lot of people who can say that. Do you know what I mean?
The only candidate who Bernie Sanders is not the second choice for is actually Kamala Harris voters. They seem to be the most anti-Bernie group.
Yeah.
It seems like they're choosing her, being against him rather than choosing her, if that makes any sense. But frankly, like if you look at I see people talk, here's some talking points that people should probably pick up, because they're going to hear the same arguments over and over again. Like there is no significant population of Democratic voters who are anti-Bernie. His approval rating, he has about a 14% disapprove among Democratic voters, self-identified Democrats, and Joe Biden has about 11%. It's statistically insignificant, and there is no significant group of people who are like super anti-Bernie. It's just kind of a phenomenon, especially among the elite media circles and a few people on Twitter who are massively amplified.
Right. The anti-Bernie people are overrepresented in our media and in our social media and within, I think, like yes. I mean, I think that.
But I thought Twitter was a representative slice of reality. No?
Well, right. Yeah. Well, of course not. I mean, and like this is, since I'm in politics, this is one thing I picked up from one of my mentors was, you are weird. If you're listening to this program and thinking about the 2020 election, you are unusual. You are spending a lot more time thinking about politics than the average person. And Bernie Sanders, when he ran in March of 2016, after 12 months of running and $200 million, he had about 60% name ID with African Americans at that point. It takes a lot of effort, time, money to get your name out there and get your message across. And he's maintained that, he's built that. And somebody like Amy Klobuchar, it's a joke. She will never compete for this election. Bernie is in a.
Are you suggesting there's no Klobuchar-mentum? going on right now?
There's no Klobuchar momentum. Yeah.
It's
And
Klobuchar
the
momentum. Not Klobuchar
I think the
momentum.
one
It's
thing-
Klobuchar momentum.
Yeah, there aren't enough horrible
Klobuchar
bosses
momentum.
in this country to really make a dent in her numbers.
Yeah. God. Well, there's one thing you kind of touched on, and I think this is my one thesis of looking at things is it's what has to happen is Biden's when they do the polls of the race right now, they're kind of forced to poll everyone. If they do not poll Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders is winning by 20 points. So they have to work him into the polls. Otherwise, it just looks like the facts are what they are.
Right.
And I believe that the evidence shows that Joe Biden would not do well if he actually entered the race. I think he would fall apart rather quickly. And there is really not a strong organic support for him. It's more like a nostalgia.
We'll find out how
situation.
obvious that information is, because he's undoubtedly looking at those numbers, and it's possible he has people around him who are saying, "You got to run, Joe. You got to run for the good of the country." But it's not like I'm not convinced that. There's enough people, and who knows, maybe there are, but that situation would require people who are just like, this is how I'm going to pay for my kids, school, year at private school this year. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where I'm going to convince Joe that he could win. And he's possibly, who knows, but I don't know.
I just, the reason why I'm really skeptical of him, I mean, maybe he will, who knows. The reason why I'm skeptical of it is there just doesn't seem to be an institutional desire for him to run.
Right.
The Obama people are not out there saying how much they love to work for Joe Biden and stumping for him and pushing him. It's almost like nobody wants him to run, but they kind of need him right now for the media argument that the race is wide open. Because if he's not in the race, if you polled just the announced candidates, Bernie would be absolutely annihilating the field. And you can't have that media narrative circulating that Bernie's that far ahead. There was a poll that was done, I think, on Friday that asked Democratic voters, who do they think the nominee was going to be? And 57% of them answered Bernie Sanders.
And that type of question is the most predictive of polling, is my understanding. The question, who do you think is going to win, is more predictive than who are you going to vote for in terms of the winner.
Yeah.
That's generally my understanding. Right. I think is that, and I may be wrong about that, but my understanding is, from what I've read, that is supposedly the more predictive question, because people tend to want to vote with the winner.
Yeah, and it's just like they're in a situation where, Bernie has both grassroots and already that baked-in name recognition, which is always the most difficult thing of an insurgent candidate, is actually getting your message out and having normal people kind of recognize that you're even running or you have a plan. And he is kind of part of our culture now. Like, Bernie he's penetrated, and he's not against the unified Democratic Party like he was in 2016.
Yep.
He's up against a very fragmented group of people who are all highly flawed.
And he's not running against the Democratic Party in some ways that he was then. Like that.
Correct.
That is, that became an obstacle for him at one point to win over certain people. And he just announced the other day, they leaked an email or something saying, show respect for the democratic institution. And again, I think that part of that is also there are communities within the Democratic Party who perceive the institution of the Democratic Party as being crucial to their well-being. And I think he's sort of, he doesn't have to run against the establishment in the way of the Democratic Party as explicitly as he did, I think, then. And I think
you can already see the kind of cracks in the armor, because like Senator Leahy, his fellow senator from Vermont, and the representative of Vermont immediately endorsed him. Whereas 4 years ago, Leahy endorsed Clinton. Bernie had one senator who endorsed him of the entire Democratic caucus.
Ron Wyden.
It's clear.
And the unions too. I wasn't surprised because I know how these things work, but a lot of the major unions endorsed Hillary Clinton the day that she announced.
Well, that was basically the conversation I had with Randy Weingarten. Is they wanted to get in early because they made the mistake in their minds of not getting in early with Obama, and they felt they had less influence, particularly the teachers' unions, and that's why everything went sideways with education.
Yeah, it was
all right,
a political calculation, right?
Fortunately, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about this.
No, I've already taken up way more than my share of
talk to you
time.
soon.
Thank you guys so
Bye-bye.
much.
Let's play this dude about John Wayne. Apparently, over the break, some stuff was revealed about John Wayne. Now, throughout the past 20 or 30 years, there's been a very vague, I think, sort of awareness that John Wayne was probably pretty retrograde type of guy. But apparently a new John Wayne Playboy interview has
it's not
resurfaced.
entirely new. I heard about this before.
Okay.
I believe in white supremacy quote.
Okay, so I mean it's been out there, but somehow it's resurfaced.
Yeah, Twitter got to it.
It's on social media, and
John
again,
Wayne is canceled.
I mean, in many respects, this is sort of like mirrors the conversation about how in March of 2016, you still had Bernie had even trouble with name recognition at that time. Social media has changed the dynamic of how, what genuine public exposure means. So John Wayne's, I don't know if his legacy is being relitigated, but I think we see this from time to time, whether it's with classical, musicians or authors.
Probably going to see more of it from rock musicians, I think.
Really?
I think there's probably a lot of stories from the 70s and 80s that are waiting for memoirs.
But I mean, you see this with, reassessing, classical, works and, but so it comes out that John Wayne had some pretty racist views that he was holding. And Fox, for some, I don't know what possible reason. Sometimes you get the feeling that on Fox, they're just like, let's just see if we can do this. They're out there trying to defend these views in a really bizarre, and not only is their argument bizarre, but the idea that they want to have this argument is bizarre. I'm not even clear why.
They're wasting a bad argument.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're hurting it.
Pejorative, says Indians were selfishly trying to keep this land, and he's glad we took it from them. And then he says this.
Pause it.
With a lot
I like how he just sort of skates over the Indians. They're trying to get us for taking their land, but then he says something really bad. Yeah, go back to the beginning again. This is from the Laura Ingraham show. And who's this guy?
Raymond Arroyo.
Yeah, they had to bring on a special correspondent to promulgate this opinion because it was so bad.
Pejorative, says Indians were selfishly trying to keep this land, and he's glad we took it from them. And then he says this. With a lot of blacks, there's quite a bit of resentment along with their dissent, and possibly rightfully so. But we can't all of a sudden get down on our knees and turn everything over to the leadership of the blacks. I believe in white supremacy, Duke said, until the blacks are educated to the point of responsibility. Now, Laura, what I don't like about both of these stories is we're judging the past in light of shifting moral, ethic, and cultural codes of today. We can't do that.
Well,
Pause it for 1 second. Now, some of you may think wow, when did he say this? In 1925? Did he say this in the late 1800s?
During the Reconstruction era?
Did he say this? Did he say this? What far off distant temporal plane did he say this? 1971. I was as old as my son. I could do addition at that time. My son is starting to read. And I'm not that old. In 1971, I got news for you. It was a fairly backwards racist position to say, like, we have to educate the blacks before we give them any type of leadership role. We're not going to get on our knees. And those Indians, they were so selfish for keeping all that land.
Was that like 5 years after the Voting Rights Act?
This is 6 years after the Voting Rights Act. So this is the argument. This is the defense, that it's the past. You're judging the past based upon the standards of 1971. It's like there was no cars at that time. There was no means of communication other than the Pony Express. It's absurd. But here they go. This is what we mean by they're ruining a good argument. I don't think it's a great argument, but it's at least an argument, right? Like, I mean, yeah, it's hard to judge maybe the actions of, like, bigotry in 1800s, 1700s, but
can't do that.
Well, they're either defacing statues or pulling them down.
Yeah.
So, and I've said this before, I'm going to keep saying this. This is what the Taliban does. The Taliban used to rip down historical markers, destroy churches. ISIS did the same thing, does the same thing. They don't want any vestige of what was.
Well,
even if it's bad, they don't want any vestige. Even if it's good, they don't want anything.
But these are two iconic images of America.
Right.
John Wayne and the sailor, the release, freedom. They're impugning America.
For the left.
They're impugning America. And if you want to settle a racist score, if you
pause
want to
it, wait a second before we go into this next part. What are they talking about, tearing down statues? Like, John Wayne, no one's trying to get John Wayne fired from a job because John Wayne is dead. And it's not like, and there is a material difference between being lauded because of your work in trying to maintain slavery versus someone being criticized because in their personal life they are racist.
They're tearing down the statue of his reputation.
Well, that's the thing, is that nobody's tearing down his statue anyway. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of John Wayne statues. I think the Burbank Airport, and I don't know if I would be like, you got to unname the Burbank Airport, because the reasons why he was, deemed worthy of an airport name really were not founded on his personal bigotry. Maybe on the structural bigotry, but not his personal bigotry. But there's to somehow squeeze this in to, like, this is like tearing down the statue of a general who fought and it led an insurrection so that they could keep humans as basically pets.
Or like ISIS destroying statues. Like ISIS found problematic. Like, this mosque is problematic, so we need to...
super problematic.
Well, they're running on empty, All they have is this culture war bullshit.
That's true. But here is, and this is the way they call it. It's the pathetic culture war. It's their culture war. Yeah. And here is this guy trying to say that, like, you're judging on the past. And here he is going to walk into, if you listen carefully, he is going to be guilty of essentially like the same type of racism that we heard from, in some respects, from John Wayne.
These are two iconic images of America. John Wayne and the sailor, the release, freedom. They're impugning America.
For the left.
They're impugning America. And if you want to settle a racist score, if you want to go settle scores, talk to Jesse Smollett. Go talk to the governor and lieutenant governor of Virginia. They got plenty of scores to settle there.
Pause it now. Now, here's what's interesting about that. If you want to settle a racist score, and I'm not 100% sure I know what that means, but he cites that Jesse Smollett. Now, and I will be honest, I had no idea who this dude was. I hadn't even heard the story, and granted, we were on vacation. I hadn't even heard the story until it was debunked. And I'm not even sure I know what the story is now, except for he claims that he was attacked by some Trump supporters, and they made that it was a racist hate crime. And it turns out that it was not, and he wanted to fight them, and maybe he had Munchausen syndrome or whatever. So I get like, if you want to settle a racist score, go talk to the guy who fabricated it. But then he says the lieutenant governor of Virginia. And race is not a part at all of that guy's controversy. He is accused by at least 2 women of sexual, unwanted sexual advances, in one case, sexual assault, and the other, I think, rape. But it has nothing to do with race. It just so happens that he's black. And so this guy just immediately says, like, well, if you want to talk about, settling racial scores, let me just pick 2 black guys. One who has, sort of on point, but just another guy who's just sort of in the news.
He's possibly a rapist. So
yeah.
Be afraid about that.
But that is their pathetic culture war, as it were.
Yeah, they named it very accurately. So thanks, guys.
They were super accurate.
This, but unironically.
What else should we... should we do the... let's do Warren on the... she talks about... this is on what? This is on the filibuster. Yeah, this is a question. I got to say, Pod Save America is doing a good job with this. Unfortunately, we can see the clips of the good things they do. So you don't actually have to go watch the whole show. But... I want to say, like, we listen to them so that you don't have to, but that's not even true.
Mm-mm.
We skim their social media
Nope.
feeds. So you don't have to.
We skim their social media feeds so that you don't have to listen. That is our service that we're providing.
Yep. My woke bae Sean has a very high tolerance for hate consumption of media. He consumes more media in a hateful way than anyone I know. He tried to listen to Pod Save America to make fun of it, and he could not get through an episode.
All right. Fair enough. But credit where credit's due. They asked a good question of, I think it was Gillibrand. They asked this question of her, and they asked this question of Warren. And this is an important question. And we had John from San Antonio said that Bernie seems to be sort of like not as leaning into. And the question has implications for different people, different implications of different people, because some people, there's a narrative of like they're institutionalists. They want to make sure that they don't have the power to impact, major or radical change. Some people actually don't want that ability because then they don't have to be the one who rejects that radical change. Case in point, I give you Andrew Cuomo as to why he wanted a runaway Democratic sub-caucus that would vote with the Republicans. It's so that he didn't have to sign legislation that was too progressive in his mind. And so some people want the filibuster so that there cannot be change that isn't more dramatic. Other people, we know they want dramatic change. They're criticized for how dramatic of change that they want. And so they may answer that question differently. That's why I'm curious as to, how Elizabeth Warren answers this question. Because I know Kristen Gillibrand probably does not want to move as fast as she might want to project. And Bernie Sanders might want to project that he wants to move a little bit more deliberately than he may want to actually move. Elizabeth Warren, let's see.
Somebody who believed very, very strongly in filibuster reform. I'm on the record on this. I fought for it for a long time because the Republicans completely blocked us, right? They weren't letting us put anybody in the courts, but it was worse than that. Not worse, equally bad. They also weren't letting us put anybody in the consumer agency, so the agency couldn't get its full legal authority. NLRB, they were about to shut down the NLRB. And the answer to that, and I think it was the right answer, was just to say we're done on the filibuster. And I voted for it. I strongly supported it.
Harry Reid blew it up.
Harry blew it up, and I think Harry was right to blow it up. I strongly supported him when he did that. Now the Republicans turn around, and they took the filibuster and blew it up even more. Yeah. So they said even on a Supreme Court nominee, and we hadn't even done anything yet, right? So first they steal a Supreme Court seat, then they turn around and change the rules on filibuster on a Supreme Court seat. And so when it swings back around to us, what are we going to do? And my answer on that is, all the options are on the table, that's how we got to do this. If the Republicans are going to try to block us on key pieces that we're trying to move forward, then you better believe we got to keep all the options on the table. And I think that's the way we should be describing it right now on everything that the Republicans are doing, that nobody's going to forget what happened here and all of the options are on the table.
So, I mean, folks can assess that answer as they may, but I do think that's probably the best way to do it, right? There is no value strategically to saying we're definitely going to do it, but the point is, are you open to it?
Considering a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I think, the answer to give. And that is that's distinct from Gillibrand, who has shut the door to getting rid of the filibuster. And be clear here, this is getting rid of the filibuster when it comes to legislation. And this scares a lot of people. It scares a lot of people, and to be fair, for both reasons. One is, what if the Republicans control the Senate? If Elizabeth Warren, and if every member, let's say, of the Democrats running, particularly the senators, say, we're going to get rid of the filibuster, Mitch McConnell is going to stand up and say, like, we're going to get rid of the filibuster. And if they lose, if they don't win the Senate, and it's no guarantee you're going to win the Senate, even if you win the presidency in 2020, you don't necessarily want to give the Republicans that quiver. I mean, that arrow in their quiver, even though the Republicans probably would do that anyway, maybe. I mean, I think if they had the Congress right now, they would do it. But if they don't have the Congress, they won't do it.
And if the Democrats were wielding it effectively.
The filibuster. Well,
like how many times
if they don't
have they
the
effectively filibustered anything?
I mean, there's been times, but not too often.
I was going to say civil rights era. Democrats were filibustering quite a lot of things back then.
But I think that's the best answer that you can get right now. There's really two answers, and that is, one, no, I won't do it. Two, definitely open to it. And speaking of being open to things, and I'm hearing a lot of like good sort of things from about Peter Buttigieg. And I'm definitely of the mind that a mayor of a decent-sized city from which he comes, a deep red state, blue state doesn't that is secondary in my mind in terms of like a mayor, their skill set is as an executive is in many respects far more suited for the presidency than let's say a congressperson or a senator. The problem is they don't have nearly the name recognition. But here he is talking about court packing. Now, there's a new paper coming out that suggests that our understanding of the history of court packing is different than it is and is expressed today. And I'm waiting to get my hands on that paper. But in the meantime, here is Peter Buttigieg at an event in Philadelphia asked about the Supreme Court.
Mayor Pete, thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate being able to hear from you. I have a question about judicial reform. Yeah. Many progressives, myself included, feel like the Supreme Court has been stolen, from the Gorsuch seat that should have been ours to the controversial Kavanaugh confirmation. And my question is, if you're elected to the presidency and you get into office and you see your agenda being thwarted by a court that has been skewed drastically to the right for many different reasons, would you support a packing of the courts to expand the Supreme Court by 4 members and restore the Gorsuch seat?
So I've not reached a considered position on the question of court packing, although I don't think we should be laughing at it. Because in some ways, it's no more a shattering of norms than what's already been done to get the judiciary to where it is today.
There you go. And I should say I'm going to look a little bit more into that core packing thing, but part of this was FDR, apparently his gambit was to reform the court, and I think there was a bigger consensus about reformation, and that one of the things about reformation of the court at that time had to do with pensions. And there have been different times where there have been very generous pensions for judges. And that was one way that, and I think this is one way that Democrats got Supreme Court justices to leave the office. And then the Republicans understood this, and so they took the pensions away. And that's what FDR was looking at. And but I'll read that paper before I speak more about it. But that's an interesting dynamic. It's nice to know that even back then, you could be lured into hugely consequential decisions that will impact millions of people based upon how much money you're going to get.
It's an American tradition.
There you go. There you go. Let's go to the IMs. We'll take a couple IMs. A Square. Welcome back, MR. Thanks, Matt, for linking deep archives to the good set of interviews. Well, to be honest, that was a Brendan. Brendan, what did you choose? Oh, you know what? We'll talk about that on we should talk about that on Free Show. The members know. In the end, this Fox position against federal government-supported childcare is aligned with the anti-reproductive rights position. Yes, it's all about getting white women subjugated, having babies, because, the brown people, even if we can effectively marginalize them, are still having more babies and one day can revolt. Race, sexism, or both, always subtext. Noah from California. By the way, Sam, Burbank Airport is the Bob Hope Airport, not the John Wayne Airport. Sorry about. John Wayne Airport is in Orange County. That's what it is. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Not for long.
Jonathan Armstead.
Yeah, Santa Ana.
Santa Ana. Have you ever had any interactions with Michael Eric Dyson? Just read his book, What Truth Sounds Like, after hearing it advertised on your podcast last year. Dyson has a weird rant against Bernie in it. He says, quote, Senator Bernie Sanders, despite his dramatically different politics and ideology, is in many ways the mirror image of Donald Trump, a brash, older white male with professed sympathies for the white working class and little knowledge of black folk. He also slams Bernie for focusing on class instead of race. Dyson also gets bizarre later, saying celebrities support Parkland over Black Lives Matter because the Parkland victims were white. Did you get a chance to check the book out before the ad last summer? I know I did not. I did not. But he was quite caught up in that at that time. I think that book was very of that time. I love Sarah Palin. I think that Tucker video sheds a little more light on what Tucker's trying to do. Capitalism is under crisis, specifically free market fundamentalism. I think Trump's success in the Republican primary confirms it. Besides the demagoguery, he ranted against trade deals and said he would bully companies that outsource jobs. Obviously, his solutions were capitalist, but Americans wanted someone to at least identify problems. I think we agree these problems faced today, market concentration and worker stagnation, are natural outgrowths of capitalism. But Tucker's diagnosis is a term people like the Kochs like. Is a term people like the Kochs like. Crony capitalism, indeed. The culprits are liberal Manhattan elites, Silicon Valley, askew liberal by virtue of business as restrained by capitalist forces, and Hollywood, who I guess is brainwashing people. If you want to beat Trump by retaking the Rust Belt, you probably need the candidate who got called a racist for doing so well with rural white people. Waterboard from Kashmir. Welcome back, MR. The idiot from Fox said AOC is paying a minimum $15, which according to the Fox idiot is $52,000 a year. Yeah. He actually said the two numbers in the same sentence. Even if you are anti-math, but happen to work hard to survive in a place like New York City, $15 an hour doesn't feel like $52,000. I've met many people, I'm a driver, who are upper middle class who have the same line of thinking, that somehow $15 an hour is around $50,000. They want to feel that minimum wage is close to $50,000 because they want to feel like their server or driver or the lady at the checkout counter is living it quite large. $15 an hour is $31,200. Aholic. Look, Feinstein's been doing this for 50 years and is just now expressing the importance of fighting climate change by promoting a diluted and stripped down version of the Green New Deal, which people have been talking seriously about for at least 20 years. Trust the old guard to make slow and effective policy. Yeah, we didn't even get to, we're not going to get to this DiFi stuff today. Maybe we will. Bernie and Bus, whatever happened to attacking the left for being morally relativistic? It's almost as if the right is morally relativistic in defending moral relativism. Doe. 5 p.m. Hearing today on Donald Trump emergency declaration, C-SPAN radio. I'd want to hear you talk about social democracies after you've seen Michael Moore's Where to Invade Next. It's all about European social democracies versus the U.S., why they're so much better, why it's economically and socially feasible, not overwhelming as naysayers claim. Theodore Zamuji. Not sure if you knew him, but I just want to give a shout out to Brody Stevens. He meant a lot to me. I did not know him. I obviously have a lot of friends who did, and it's a really sad story. Really sad story. How he struggled with a lot of emotional issues, and it's just terribly sad to have someone kill themselves. So, yes, rest in peace. Kentucky Fried Comrade, regarding the California primary moving up, I'd like to remind people that in 2008, California primary was February 5th, and Clinton beat Barack Obama. It's an important state, but due to its proportional allocation of delegates, not a definitive win for a nomination. That's right. And I would say, in many respects, it represents more danger for Harris because the opportunity for her to underperform there is there. And if she can't crush it in California against Bernie, it's going to be a bit of a problem. Or maybe not just Bernie, but against anybody. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 610. It's next up. I don't know what to tell you, folks. Who's this?
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, Sam. This is Steve. Can you hear me?
I can, Steve. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from outside Audubon.
Okay.
Audubon, PA.
Audubon, PA. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk to you about the Green New Deal. I don't know if you saw the footage of Dianne Feinstein talking to those kids.
Yeah.
Kind of reprehensible how she acted. But more importantly, I'm hearing more and more that the Green New Deal isn't going to go far enough in dealing with the problems that we're going to come across. Like there are people talking about how we're going to see it get sabotaged by people in the oil industry who have a vested interest in trying to derail it, right? So I wanted to know if you think that we can what it's actually going to take. 'Cause to me, it looks like we're going to need to mobilize on the level of something like our production in World War II to actually face the problem. And something to aside to Jamie, do you think we can actually address these issues under capitalism? Do you think that we're going to is it going to need a much more radical, revolutionary solution? I'll take my answer offline. Thank you guys for everything you do.
Appreciate the call. I'm not sure if there are two separate questions. Is it sufficient and will it get derailed? Those are two separate questions. I don't know if this plan in and of itself is sufficient. I would, if I had to just guess, I would say probably not. I mean, but it's not, I don't know that there's anything that the United States in and of itself can do that's going to be sufficient. That doesn't mean that it's not necessary. It can very well be necessary and not fully sufficient. It also can be necessary insofar as that we may not be able to take a sufficient first step. I think we can take steps that are first steps that are insufficient that can lead to a more sufficient second step, and we can take insufficient first steps that will not lead to a more sufficient second step. So if that makes sense. In other words, Dianne Feinstein was, when she met with these kids, was being very condescending, and I understand. There was an edited tape and there was the full tape, and I watched both tapes, and she was condescending in both tapes. Was she rude to them, as rude as comes off in the greatest hits? No, but so what? At the end of the day, she was still condescending, and here's the part where what's really relevant in terms of what with the exchange with Dianne Feinstein. And I guess we're going to play this now.
Can I answer the question?
Well, I know what your answer is. No, it's not going to. Capitalism's not going to do it. And
well, there's more nuance than that.
We will get there. But let's go over this Dianne Feinstein thing, because at this juncture, in terms of legislation, there's potentially two pieces of legislation. There's the one that Dianne Feinstein drafted in response to the Green New Deal coming out of the House. And then there's the Green New Deal. And there will not be anybody sponsoring the demise of capitalism in the meantime. And it's quite possible that that under our under capitalism, we're not going to be able to address this. And if that's the case, you know, it's really more just about planning for the day after, or you know, when there's a broader understanding of how devastating the global climate change will or may will be.
Majority report in 2060 will be: can capitalism help us recover from climate change?
Yeah, exactly.
Can capitalism get my house out from underwater?
But here is these kids. Most of them are kids. There's some moms of the kids and maybe a dad or two.
Activists, as Glenn Beck would call them.
Yes, they're activists. And they're from the group, which number
Sunrise
is this?
Movement.
Oh, yeah, Sunrise Movement. And like I said earlier, these are the people who occupied Nancy Pelosi's office. They occupied Mitch McConnell's office today. But they know, and this is very reasonable, there's only one party that has the potential to address this. That party may not address it, but there's only one party that has even the potential to address it. And there's only one party where these people may have some leverage with. That's why they're protesting Democrats. That's why when people wanted to protest about DACA years ago, they did it with Barack Obama, who didn't want to move anywhere on DACA. But those protests that were considered rude at that time, trying to make Barack Obama look bad, were highly effective in the end. I would say the same thing with marriage equality. But here are these kids from the Sunrise Movement, and they're talking about, they're about to go see Dianne Feinstein.
We're gonna go in and share this letter, and we're gonna do it all together. Yeah. Share it in front of Feinstein. Okay. We're asking her to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
We are trying to ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Please.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We have our own Green New Deal.
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years. What we can do,
Senator, if
is
this doesn't get turned around in 10 years, you're looking at the faces of the people who are going to be living with these consequences.
The government is supposed to be for the people and by the people, and all
You know
for the
what's
people.
interesting about this group is I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing. You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway. I don't respond to that. I've gotten elected. I just ran. I was elected by almost 1 million vote plurality. And I know what I'm doing. So, you know, maybe people should listen a little bit.
I hear what you're
Pause
saying.
it now. I just want to be clear. That segment there was not edited. She said all that. Now, granted, as the video goes on later, and we'll play a little moment of that, she softens a little bit. But make no mistake about what this conversation is. And in addition to being condescending and dismissive and relying on her authority and the fact that she got elected, which are completely irrelevant to this. I mean, I could see her saying, like, look, I've been at this a long time and I know what, you know, how we can take the first steps in this. But I watched the whole video. There was none of that. She does argue that this is the one thing that we could get past. But they made the point. We know nothing's going to pass. We know nothing's going to pass as long as Republicans have power. Because even if you could pass it in the Senate, it's not going to pass. Donald Trump is going to veto it. They say you can vote for both. You can vote yes for both. And she keeps brushing that off because that's the thing she doesn't want to answer. She doesn't want to answer why you won't vote for both. She tries to make it about, you got to be practical. And then she tries to make it about, you got to trust me. And she tries to make it about, you got to respect me. But she will not answer why she won't vote for both. Even the people, I mean, look at someone like her the other senator from California, Kamala Harris. She signed on to all 3 different versions of potential health care reform in the Senate as co-sponsor. So you could shoot for the moon, she could argue, shoot for the moon, but I want to be there too for the possible practical solutions. But Dianne Feinstein doesn't want to even open the door to that. She is not making the argument to these kids, I know how to build this. This takes some skill. And I have this skill, and you can trust me to have this skill because I'm going to pass this, and then we're going to pass that. She doesn't have the respect for these kids or the fortitude to say, I'm not going to vote for that. That's too radical. That's too dramatic. She doesn't do that. Instead, she shames them, she this and that, and when it doesn't work and she realizes she's got to go, she starts warming up a little bit. But continue here.
I hear what you're saying, but we're the people who voted you. You're supposed to listen to us. That's your
How old are you?
job.
How old
I'm
are you?
16. I
Well,
can't
you didn't vote for me.
Well, I'm 24.
It doesn't matter. We're the ones who's going to be impacted.
Something.
It doesn't matter. We're going to be the ones who are impacted.
I understand that. I have 7 grandchildren. I understand it very well.
Pause it. I can't be a misogynist. I have a mom. I have a daughter. I have a cousin who's a woman. Ask the moms. Continue.
Senator, the cost of not taking this action is far higher than the cost of what the Green New Deal will be. And there is enormous popularity for this bill around the whole country. And we're asking you to be brave and do this for us and for your grandchildren.
Get enough for everyone. I'm trying to do the best I can, which was to write a responsible resolution.
Any plan that doesn't take bold, transformative action is not going to be what we need.
Well, you know better than I do. So I think one day you should run for the Senate.
Great.
And then you do it your way.
But by that time,
in the meantime,
there's going to be a big problem.
I just won a big election.
She won a big election. Now, for all fairness, a lot of people are like, oh, you're just putting out the edited version of the 15-minute exchange or 20-minute exchange. I watched the unedited version. And yes, there are moments where towards the end, like I say, in fact, let's play the denouement here, where they start to usher the kids out of the thing. And One of the staffers even said, like, I'm for conservation. I like the backpack, which is not in any way condescending or missing of the point at all.
I'm reassured about the future of the planet.
Yes. I'm for conservation. Like, conservation? What? What the F are you talking about? Guess what, buddy? You'll be able to backpack. A lot of people will be backpacking. A lot of people are going to be backpacking. You won't be able to be backpacking because you're going to be dead. You're going to be old or dead, like me. But when people come in to talk about climate change and you say, I'm with you, I like to backpack, you might be giving away a little bit too much of the narrative. But put that aside. I'm not going to hold Dianne Feinstein responsible for one of her staffers. I mean, I imagine she hired him, but whatever. But here's the moment that redeems everything for Dianne Feinstein, according to those who said you're being too mean by passing around an edited video.
So you see exactly what happens with things. So you have an understanding of what can get done.
All right.
People spend hours in futile pursuit when if you work something in a certain way, it can get done. I believe this.
Pause it. Here she is talking about we need to focus on what can pass with the Republicans in the Senate. But this is absurd because we know that Donald Trump's not going to sign off on this. And so what she's doing is just as futile in terms of the ultimate goal as promoting the Green New Deal. And I would argue it's even more futile because if you're going to lose big, win the principle. Set it up for the next time when you do have more votes. Nobody, you're pre-negotiating against yourself and looking at these kids and saying, you don't get it? You idiots? No, I'm not saying idiot. I'd actually even give you an internship.
Done. So before you criticize it, read it. That's all.
I will. Criticize. How can I start an internship here?
You want to do an internship here? You got one.
I can give you my card.
Yeah. She can have an internship.
Sure.
Okay.
Is that a promise?
Isha Clark. Hi, Isha. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
He's the head man, and Isha Clark will do an internship here, Jim.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Please vote yes on the
Jim ain't too happy. I can assure you that. There it is. There was the big magnanimous thing. She basically said, "You kids don't get it. I've been here for 30. I don't get in a million years, frankly, whether her victory was by 1 vote or 10 million votes. Why that has." I mean, so she doesn't have to listen to them, or they automatically are wrong because she won by so many votes? I don't understand why that's brought up.
Yeah, popular people's opinions hold more weight than unpopular people's. It's like a law of nature.
I wonder if she says that to the industry folks that come in. Look, which is actually probably more relevant.
I would love
frankly.
to say it to those people.
That's
you know how much I won by? California Gas Company.
Exactly. I wonder if those words. I mean, I suppose that. I mean, maybe it was. But.
Yeah, stuff like that just reminds me that despite my left critiques of the Green New Deal as a necessary but insufficient solution, we still got to do it. And it's pissing off a lot of the right people.
It's not. I mean, newsflash. You don't have to be 7 or 10 to understand that Donald Trump is going to veto anything. That in any way, they are assembling a team of basically paid scientists who will say that there's no climate change. But we're gonna find a happy medium that what?
You have better luck doing psyops on like Ivanka. And try to get her to make her dad do something.
All right. I'm going to go. We'll get the final call of the day. I'm going to go pull this out of. Calling from a 501 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Blake from Arkansas.
Blake from Arkansas.
Yes, sir. You guys are talking a lot about climate change, and I definitely wanted to do that with you this afternoon. What do you guys have in plans? Like, what can you say that you could immediately do, since time is of the essence, to offset CO2 emissions? I mean, what in that group of minds there in your office, what would you do immediately?
I would heavily subsidize the production and the development of alternative energy sources. I would maybe nationalize some of the refining capacity and then ultimately increase the fee. I mean, the easiest things to do would be
nationalize the refining capacity
of
how would that affect the CO2?
Well, because I'd be able to regulate how much fossil fuel we refine, and therefore we burn ultimately. I would also then probably, narrow the use of federal lands, maybe basically say no federal lands can be used. I would pull those licenses. I mean, things that would be the quickest in terms of, I imagine you'd get a lot of court cases involved in nationalizing, but those would be some of the first things that I would do.
Mm-hmm. You guys come at it from kind of a governmental level, a policy level.
Yeah, exactly.
Nationalizing the refineries, for instance.
Right.
So what do you think about our existing train infrastructure?
I would increase our train infrastructure. Yes. I would add for more mass transit. Yes.
Okay, moving freight by trains, is that would be a better option than millions upon millions of semis driving millions of miles every year, right?
I think yes.
I mean, the average truck driver probably drives like 900,000 a million miles a year, and they're everywhere. I don't necessarily know about.
You could do more short run stuff. Yes, I would raise.
Well, not even short run with semis, but utilize our trains, and you can have one engine move hundreds of thousands of tons.
Sure.
That would be something that I would think. I thought about localized farming rather than importing things from around the world, on barges with waste, that kind of thing, then trucking them from, borders and the desert in California where we seem to be able to grow avocados. What do you think about that? Localized farming, like Iowa, for instance, where I grew up. There's miles and miles and miles of corn, and we export that stuff overseas.
Well, and I think also part of the problem is, frankly, is that we, if we're going to get this deep into it, we subsidize a lot of that corn. We subsidize a lot of soy. And I think I would reevaluate that policy because it promotes factory farming, which I think is also problematic. I think, the idea of making food cheaper, which was what the intent was in subsidizing corn and soy back in the early 70s. So there was more disposable income for consumers, was a little bit short-sighted. We've created all these factory farms. I would put all of that on the table.
Oh, I have an idea, and I promise it's more incremental than abolishing capitalism.
Okay.
Shorten the work week. This is a demand that is very popular in various leftist movements throughout history, and I think we need to bring it back. The amount of emissions that would be saved from people commuting one less day a week would be astronomical. And also, people get to work less for the same amount of money, which is also great.
And you could actually increase...
Definitely, on a personal level, sure. Running your errands 1 or 2 days a week rather than, a couple hours every day after work. Yeah, that's people that commute from the suburbs into the cities and back out again, installed traffic and idling engines and people losing their minds. And I'm with you. That's definitely something that we could change on a company or a personal level. I was talking about kind of broadly speaking, big changes since time is of the essence.
Correct.
What do you think about for instance, the third world. So what I mentioned about corn and soy and sending them as aid to other countries. I'd take like Ethiopia and Somalia, for instance. Their climate, let's say, is not able to sustain their current populations. And so we send a lot of food there in times of famine and drought, and we feed the population, and their population grows, and they're still in the same area, subject to the same climate circumstances, or even worsening in the future. Now, it costs fossil fuels to send that stuff perennially over and over again to feed the population.
I would say, look,
make their economy lazy and overinflated.
I would probably put sending food to two countries that are suffering from famine pretty low on my list of priorities to cut. I mean, there's, I think once we were to achieve, sort of our optimal, in the context of what we're capable of doing, levels of clean energy, and I would try and export these technologies. And I would also, try and make it such that these technologies were available to even our supposed rivals. Like I would say China is probably more of an issue, and even Europe is more of an issue, and Russia is even more of an issue than Ethiopia and Somalia that we're propping up with emergency food.
Well, those were just two examples. It started kind of maybe back in the late 70s, early 80s. But I mean, the barges go down the Mississippi River and they go.
No,
to other countries.
I get you.
It's not just those countries. Okay, so what then do you think about the fact that the United States is lowering its CO2 emissions despite not implementing like the new Green Deal that you guys?
Well, it's
kind of
necessary and insufficient. I mean, the CAFE standards were fought against. I mean, the loans to the solar companies fought against. Unfortunately, China, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, saw an opening when there was pushback on the subsidies to U.S. companies that were subsidized loans to U.S. companies that were making, solar and energy panels and whatnot. I think it's good that we're reducing carbon.
I don't know the particular history of the loans. I mean, I think if they were fought against,
were you not here during the
given.
Were you not here during the Obama era?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean,
I can't say that I was paying 100% attention, but I mean, the
you have
the
access
kind
to
of
the
flagship was Solyndra, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That didn't go very well.
Solyndra,
that was kind of that was kind of the charter, right?
Well, some hits, some misses. I mean, Tesla was a pretty big success from that era of spending.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of venture capital, right?
Right.
Now, venture capital, you know what they do, right? You know what their business model is, right? Venture capitalists.
Yeah.
They invest in a bunch of different things. They all don't come in, correct?
Kind of long shots, kind of mid-major penny stocks kind of thing. Yep.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So if you think
if you don't get
100%,
if you don't get 100% success rate, you think that it's not worth your while.
Well, not necessarily. It depends on
what is the success rate that you think is legitimate.
I mean, do you think that it's feasible to be 100% off fossil fuels in 10 years?
Do I think it's feasible to be 100% off? In this country, I don't know if we can get 100% off, but I do know that there is absolutely no downside in trying relative to what we face. I mean, will it be easy? Of course, exerting the effort is going to be difficult. And there may be instances where it's like, oh, we have this inconvenience in our life, or we have this thing. But, faced with the potential downside of something, yeah, I would say let's throw the kitchen sink at it and let's aim for 100%. And if we hit 80% in 10 years, that's much better than hitting 25%.
So since the United States is kind of on the downturn of CO2 emissions and our population is, well, at least somewhat stable. I mean, it's not growing as much as other parts of the world, for instance, like Bangladesh or India or China.
I agree.
And they're becoming more and they're becoming more dependent on fossil fuels. Contrast the change that we could theoretically or practically make versus their usage rates increasing probably exponentially over the same time period.
So if I understand you correctly, what you're advocating is do nothing because we can't control the other people.
That's not what I said.
I know. I'm trying to figure out what your point is. What is your point?
Contrast the world change that we could possibly make by completely tipping over our economy and hoping that it lands on its head.
What do you think we should do?
How is it going to hurt the
economy? That are probably going
economy?
to do nothing if not make their usage worse in relation to CO2 emissions.
What do you think we should do?
I have a whole lot of things that I could list. If you'd like, we can come back and talk at length about it. I just thought that I would ask you what you guys had in mind personally, immediately there within your own studio.
Right.
The idea of refineries and nationalizing them and controlling them. The United States is not required to import any fuel anymore. We're fossil fuel independent. So there's no need for tankers to be coming across the oceans and relying on Saudi oil and all this kind of stuff. Now, that's a positive as far as CO2 emissions go. I don't understand what the point of nationalizing refineries is unless you want to starve the market.
Yeah,
people are still going.
There you go. I want to starve the market.
If you do that immediately, what's that?
Yeah, I want to.
If you do that immediately, people are still going to have to drive cars.
Well, I understand. But
using,
if I control the refineries, I can throttle it in such a way that simultaneously subsidizing the renewable energy. I mean,
Public transit.
Just said that, right?
Yeah.
Solarinja, or whatever it is, times 50.
Yeah. I don't think any of us are arguing for a regressive carbon tax like the thing that caused the Yellow Vest riots in France, right?
Right.
I just don't think that's
there was
sufficient.
something that I considered. There was something that I considered several years ago. I thought I'd see what you guys thought about it. There's some holes in it. But, so where your workplace is, the zip code, and then where you live, the zip code. What about taxing people based on how far away they commute?
That's a regressive tax.
Or a gas tax. I mean,
don't put this on the working class. It's not going to end well.
If I put in sufficient public service, public transit, then I would contemplate what you're talking about. But
if the majority of this country is working class, who is it that you are hoping to affect to make the changes that you would like within our economy and our CO2
if we provide sufficient public transit, then I would have less of a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm totally with that.
Okay, great. Appreciate the call. That was really helpful. Man. Okay. I'm going to do 10 more IMs. Folks, I'm sorry. We just didn't have time for all the calls that we had stacked up there. And I apologize.
I'll just say, I think everybody, even working class, is going to have to make some sacrifices.
Absolutely.
But as long as the top end makes the most sacrifices and that's evident to people, I don't think it's going to matter.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Actual shared sacrifice, as opposed to the shared sacrifice that we often see in crises, which is not shared sacrifice.
I mean, it depends how you define sacrifice too. Like, I personally,
like not driving as much.
I would love it if there were trains everywhere I wanted to go and I didn't have to drive as much. Like, that would not be a hardship for me to like sit on a train and listen to a podcast.
But that's how you're looking at it. Some people will will experience the decline of the automobile as
absolutely
a problem.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I mean, nothing we
do.
do.
There are folks who live out of borough, who would theoretically have to try and get into the city, who even if you had a high-speed bus or, light rail out in front of their house would be like, I want to take my car. And this is BS. And yeah, so guess what?
Well,
you're not gonna take
it's going to require a whole paradigm shift, right? Because if you just impose some kind of regressive carbon tax that primarily hits working class people who can't afford to live in the city center and have to commute and don't replace it with anything, leave all the same power structures in place where all of these fossil fuel companies have tons and tons of lobbying money to like keep better trains from happening. That's really bad.
Right.
But it's going to require
but you could call it a paradigm. You can call it a paradigm shift, and other people will call it a sacrifice.
True. I also think the things that we do on an individual consumer level, they don't really matter. So on the level of selling this sacrifice to people, I think it would have to go hand in hand with democratizing more control over the economy and over production. So like, we know that we can't solve the problem the way things are right now. I don't know if people would vote if they had a vote over what gets produced to produce less meat, less gasoline, blah blah blah, etc. But I think we'd have a better chance.
I don't know about that. I don't know. I think you could cutting subsidies for might be easier to do. But maybe you're right. Maybe a large plebiscite on some level would be.
I have a whole long thing about this, but I sense that we're out of time.
We are out of time.
Perhaps I will come in early tomorrow.
Okay. All right. So let's do 6 more of these, and then we'll get going. JJ Cool. Do you guys think American military intervention in Venezuela is likely, and would Trump have enough support to do so? I don't know how much support he needs to do, a limited thing, but I do think that some form of our intervention or maybe our backing, I don't know if likely, I don't know what percentage likely is, but I don't think it's certainly plausible.
Covert likely and overt possible.
Jeffy, if we keep the filibuster, everyone should stand up and speak Ted Cruz, green eggs and ham style. PDX, Tony, Jeff Merkley. Right. I'm sorry. It's not Ron Wyden. It was Jeff Merkley. Merkley's a hero for Oregon and the country. Wyden's a weirdo libertarian. That's true. Yes. Snowflake. Agree with Jamie about means testing childcare, but Warren's proposal is a good first step. Also, health insurance detached from unemployment may lower demand for childcare, especially in higher income families. That's true. Contagious Chameleon. Do you think having all these Democratic presidential candidates will help get more Democrats elected? I do. Apathetic Steamroller. Reminder that according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, homelessness in the U.S. could effectively be eliminated for only $20 billion a year. I know, that's unbelievable. Adam Cokehead. Is there going to be a Bad Bunny Seder sex tape? Just kidding. No disrespect to either of you. I got to do a little more research. Left is European. Hope you guys had a great vacation. Can you ask Jamie if she knows how DSA in general and her specific branch will relate to the primaries? We're going to have to say that for another day, but put that down on the list.
Cliffhanger.
Alpha, DRG, last week, biggest week of the new election run, biggest event on Sam's Twitter, thirsting over a hot Twitch streamer. Community is weird. It's not true. And the final IM of the day. Producer Lauren, welcome back. Just a heads up that Google AdSense is placing ads from the NRCC asking for donations to the Trump campaign on your YouTube channel, sometimes even interrupting the longer videos. Also, with Canada holding by-elections today for its parliament, which determine which party captures the prime minister's office, have you noticed that Mark Maron looks like one of Justin Trudeau's advisors? I mean, Mark Maron is a Quebecois name. Eh? Hash the fash. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how much